Um, Last night was my birthday party. I'm old, getting older still. But we had a party last night, and we saw two movies, kind of a double feature. And both of them are movies I haven't seen in a while. That I liked, that I hadn't seen in a while. And they were Captain America Civil War and the Star Wars movie. So I thought, maybe I'll do a review of one of those. I didn't start doing this until like I think 4 weeks ago, like a month ago. And much too late to review either of those movies. But I liked both of them quite a lot, and I'd like to do sort of a review. Leaning on the two, I'd kind of like to do Star Wars, honestly. Because Rogue One's coming up in, I guess, December? And that'd be kind of cool to do like a little review, just a discussion of it, because I know it's been discussed a bit. And I have my own reactions to this film, but also reactions to other people's reactions. People have made comments about it. My turn too. My turn now. Kind of go from there. Because, I think I'm going to do a review of Star Wars Force Awakens. We'll see how that works out. Here's the thing. You can't talk about Star Wars Force Awakens without talking about Star Wars. Duh. But here's the thing. When you're talking about Star Wars, what you really mean to say is we need to talk about the original trilogy. We also need to talk about the prequels just a bit. And I'd like to talk about the original trilogy, first of all. Which is to say, this is going to be a discussion about Star Wars at large. So this is pretty comprehensive shit I just jumped into. Alright, so let's go. Star Wars. The original Star Wars was done by George Lucas. He actually wanted to do, I believe, Flash Gordon, or something like Flash Gordon. I think he wanted to actually do a Flash Gordon film. He was unable to get the rights, so what he did was, screw you guys, I'll make my own Flash Gordon. Kinda, sorta. And he had this overarching plan for how he was going to essentially rip off Flash Gordon and a couple other things. In an interesting way, interesting take on it. And he didn't, funny enough, he didn't get his way. He wanted characters to be different, and he wanted the plot to be different, and so on and so forth. And there's an first time I saw it was less than a year ago, but it's been in existence for longer, was someone did, for whatever reason, they had a camera on George Lucas, and he's talking to the camera, and he's kind of bitching about, well, I'm the director, but people who aren't the director are making creative decisions they really shouldn't be doing, and blah, 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 blah. I'm George Lucas. Fuck you all. Which I thought was really interesting, because a lot of what is cool about Star Wars didn't come from George Lucas. It came from that the dynamic aspect of having all that many creative people. The original Star Wars movie was wrought with all sorts of disasters and problems and setbacks, and sort of, well, how can we work around this? How can we maybe alter the story a little so that this isn't a problem? We can't do this, so we'll try to figure out a way to do this. This actor isn't really like this character on script. Let's rewrite the character a little bit so it fits what the actor can do and what the actor, play to his strengths a little better, and so on and so forth. The whole film's like that. And it created something very unique. Despite the fact that, like I said, the whole thing is essentially a rip-off of Flash Gordon. The title crawl, you can go back to Flash Gordon, Commando Cody, Rocket Men from the Moon. Oh, geez, there's a couple others. They all did that sort of, title crawl of thing. We always associate it with Star Wars nowadays. But it's much older. It's from old black and white sci-fi serials. A lot of the stories, I'm told that the that final climax where Luke Skywalker and crew are going down, they're attacking the Death Star, and they have to hit this specific target. I'm told that, from what I understand, almost scene for scene, including the way the planes move and everything, and the dialogue, almost word for word, is from an older movie about World War II Allied bombers attacking a Nazi dam. And the premise of the World War II movie is that the way they attacked the dam was really interesting. This is kind of interesting. Okay, I'm into this video now. I'm engaged and I have a topic, so let's go. let's go from just briefly to go over this as an example of some of the stuff that Lucas pulled to make Star Wars. In the World War II movie, the premise was there's a dam, and the only way to attack it, because the way dams are set up, they're largely vertical structures. You can't just attack them with bombs the same way you would, and it needed to be, and it had like gun outposts and all sorts of stuff, anti-aircraft weapons and what have you. The only way to attack it was to come towards the front, and they had bombs that were set with fuses that were specifically set to skip the same way you would with a rock. Like you skip a rock across the surface of a pond, bombs were set to go the same way. And what's more is, it had to skip exactly 3 times. Like skip, like the bomb could detect each skip, skip, boom. So you couldn't just drop. Can't drop a bomb on this dam because of the setup. You have to fly at it, and you have to not just have the bomb go towards it. It actually has to skip across the water. What's more, it has to skip a specific number of times. Apparently Lucas just pulled word for word. Like, some of the dialogue seems a little like, what does that mean? It hit, it's a hit, but it didn't go off. That's actually from that movie. It's kind of a neat little detail, I thought. But you get, in a larger sense, the original Star Wars films, like George Lucas was a genius. I think that's been thoroughly debunked at this point. He really wasn't. It was kind of... He had some ideas. Those ideas didn't work. He ripped off a bunch of better ideas from other stuff. And you could even argue some of that stuff, like Flash Gordon, is kind of a ripoff of older stuff. So whatever. But it turned out very well. It was the big summer blockbuster film that kind of ignited this whole thing. It had created a franchise the likes of which hadn't really existed in that form previously. And that was neat. And that was a good place to go. But I'm bringing this up for a specific reason. And that's because there's this sort of idea in fandom that there are ideas and concepts and philosophies that enshrined in the Star Wars franchise that, you know, all the other movies have to respect and so on, or else something or other. And that's nonsense. It isn't. Just write a good story and make it fit into the other thing, and you're doing great. Tapping back to our original premise, which is a review of Star Wars Force Awakens. It didn't need to be Star Wars, because Star Wars was a cobbled together a collection of ideas from other stuff, from lots of other stuff. World War II movies, Flash Gordon serials, and other stuff too. So, just make something cool. And indeed, I'd argue that Star Wars itself would have been a big deal, but not as big a deal if it weren't for the sequel. Because the sequel, Empire Strikes Back, briefly, worth mentioning, George Lucas didn't write or direct The Empire Strikes Back. He had as little influence on that as anything in the Star Wars trilogy, Star Wars movies, up until Force Awakens. And that's generally held up as the best one. It's just an amazing coincidence, that's all. Not a plan. to reiterate, a lot of what makes Star Wars good, the original film, and to a much greater extent the second one, Empire Strikes Back, wasn't planned out. Not the first one, certainly. What was cool about the first one is it was a lot of things that had not been done before in that format. If Lucas had just been allowed to do Flash Gordon, I think he would have done a fine job, because we'd never had a big budget Flash Gordon to that point yet. But he ended up making and being, let's be clear, being forced to make something different, because he couldn't, not just because he wasn't allowed to make Flash Gordon, but because he had to make a lot of compromises, and because there were a lot of other creative, smart people with original ideas also working with him on it. As much as he complained on the original set and later on, those people who need names, I can't just sit here and not name them. 1977, God, I can't believe it's that long ago. I saw this in the theater when I was a kid. Gary Kurtz was the producer. Massive success on an $11 million budget, which in 1977 was more than you'd think. I mean, oh my God, nowadays, $11 million, you'd think of that as an independent film. It's crazy. I suspect with inflation and so on, particularly this was the 70s, you'd think a little different about that. But still, Alec Guinness, God, so much about this was so cool. But it was a good movie, it was different, it was interesting, it was a fun adventure done correctly. As an aside, it's worth mentioning, I sound kind of critical of George Lucas, because I am. I mean, in the original film, while he was the director, a lot of the stuff a director does, Lucas didn't do. Other people did. Kurtzman did some of that. Other people did that. The second film, which was amazing. I mean, this is why Star Wars is amazing. It was an original space, it was supposed to be a space western. Instead, it was a space opera. Subtle differences between the two, although elements of both, strong elements of both. Let's emphasize that. It was a fun space adventure done well. Anytime you make a movie, you're rolling a lot of dice, a lot of gambles. You can have a perfect crew, perfect script, perfect director, and it could still not turn out right. And vice versa. You could have an absolutely ridiculously bad everything, and, you know, the stars align correctly and things just turn out well. There's no accounting for taste, and there's no accounting for bad luck. Or good luck, for that matter. Star Wars was good, but then after that they made a sequel. They got Lucas out of the director chair and out of the scriptwriting business. They got... oh shit, I am always ashamed I don't know that guy's name off the top of my head. Irving Kershner. Irving Kershner is a very good director. If you don't know his name, look him up. Very cool guy. He also worked with Gary Kurtz, who was the producer of both the original film, where he did a lot of the work that a director normally does on a movie, and then did a lot of the same work in Empire Strikes Back, with Irving Kershner completely taking over as director. Like I said, George Lucas was mostly the director, but he didn't do a lot of the script supervision for the actors, go over that sort of aspect of it. Some of the things that a director usually does. And it just happened to be one of the best movies ever made. In fact, I'd argue Irving Kershner is a great director, but Empire is kind of the best one he's done, best film he's directed. He's done other stuff too. But this was he just got lucky, and this just happened to be the one that was the best he did. It had a bigger budget than the previous one, and the bigger budget served it very well. The effects in the 80s were better than they were in the 70s. Once again, it's a die roll. Just all the elements came together correctly to make one of the best films ever, which certainly didn't hurt the original Star Wars film, that its sequel was even bigger and better, more dramatic, and it didn't have a cliched happy ending. Like, Han Solo's been stolen away. I mean, it's just Luke Skywalker's hand is cut off. I mean, it's depressing almost, and it was great. It was good drama inserted into a space opera, which had great space western aspect, perfect direction. I'd argue the acting in this is better from everyone. Hamill, Harrison, Ford, Carrie Fisher. Everyone's acting is better. We're introduced to new characters. Billy D. Williams as fucking Lando Calrissian. He was so awesome in that. It's like just, I gotta talk about Lando Calrissian for just 2 minutes, because I'm so off base at this point. This is gonna be like 3 hours long, stupid review of Force Awakens, and I'm so off track, it's stupid. Anyway, the thing is, I think Lando Calrissian was so well received, other people have commented on this too, is that Han Solo was supposed to be a space pirate, but he didn't come across as a space pirate. When I say strong space western elements throughout the film, but focused very narrowly on Mr. Solo. He is such a space cowboy, it's awesome. He's supposed to be a space pirate, doesn't come across as a pirate type. Certainly not a realistic depiction of one, but not even a fantastical depiction of one. I mean, pirates don't act like him. He's a cowboy. He's like a scoundrel cowboy guy. We wanted a space pirate, sorta, and we got one. And it's Lando Calrissian, all the way. Absolutely, best space pirate ever. I mean, no questions asked. I can't think of a better space pirate than Lando Calrissian. I would totally be... God, if they do... I think the plan for the new movies is going to be 6 movies, from what I understand. Like, there's going to be Force Awakens, the sequel to it, the second film in this trilogy, will be released 2 years later, which is, say, next year, with alternating with these sort of prequel films or sort of standalone sort of movies. If they do one with its heavy duty, like Lando Calrissian, I'm so on board. I'm so on board on that. It's stupid. Because he's an awesome character. His dialogue implies a complex and interesting backstory with both him and Han Solo and Chewbacca and the rest, and I want to see that story. I'd like to. It's tantalizing enough to make the character seem real when they introduced him in Empire, and back to my original premise with Force Awakens, the way it's realistically depicting the events, God, 30 years later or whatever, from Return of the Jedi. I would like to see their take on Lando Calrissian. I can't think of any of the other characters. I hope Boba Fett comes back, because I know Lucas hated him. He fucking hated him. Hated Boba Fett, loved Jar Jar Binks. How do you feel about George Lucas's judgment, creatively? I mean, anyone who defends this dude... Like, there were people at one point for Force Awakens, there was like a Kickstarter or something, or an online petition to get rid of this J.J. Abrams guy and get George Lucas back in the director's chair where he belongs. And I was like, are you fucking nuts? Yeah, I had issues with the second Abrams Star Trek movie. I think there were some serious issues there. But I liked the first Star Trek movie a lot. Overall, I like what J.J. Abrams does. Like, he did a very good take on it. I could see the Star Trek being done much worse. Pardon me, I've seen Star Trek done much worse. And I thought he did great. In Force Awakens, this was a great continuation of the original storyline. I was going to talk about the prequels too. I'm not going to. Fuck them. Like I said, I think I'll just leave it with, continuing on with this, I'm just going to leave it with, look, with what I've just said, the fact that he had the least to do with the best of the original trilogy, Empire Strikes Back, and he had most to do with Return of the Jedi, which I'd argue is the weakest of the three, where he had the most influence and power on that. And for God's sake, if there's any doubt, after that he did Howard the fucking Duck, and not a very good adaptation of Howard the Duck. So, oh, but maybe he's gotten better since then. Hey, did you know he did a musical last year? An animated musical. Strange Magic, no one's heard of it. It's perfect. Perfect. I'm not going to dwell on that. Let's move forward. Strange Magic is still killing me. No one's heard of that film. He bragged. Lucas bragged. He's like, oh yeah, what I did for 12-year-old boys with the Star Wars movie, I'm going to do that for 12-year-old girls with this Strange Magic movie. It's going to be a rebirth, the Phoenix-like rebirth of George Lucas. I mean, he's actually done a surprisingly small number of films as well as he's known. He honestly hasn't done that much. I mean, he's directed trilogy, so that's 6. He's directed 6 films in his entire life. And that's it. Even Strange Magic, he wasn't the director. He was the writer and executive producer. He had nothing to do with Force Awakens. He was a creative consultant, and that's it. Strange Magic, from what I understand, I haven't seen it, and I want to. I want to tear it to pieces. Generally, I don't like to see movies that I think are shitty, because I don't want. I just don't care that much. But I would like to see Strange Magic, and just, if I see something good, I was like, hey, it did this good. But this looks awful. Pardon me, that wasn't the budget. Holy shit, that wasn't the budget. That was its box office return. Holy crap. Yeah, that makes sense. A normal animated film would cost at least $70 million if George Lucas did it. He's not efficient. God, that movie probably lost so much money. Alright. Let's start with the characters. And this is where I'm going to get a little contentious. The movie starts off with, and you've seen this film, I refuse to believe someone watching this, if anyone's watching this, they haven't seen this film already. But it starts with Poe Dameron and Finn. We see them on screen for together for 2 minutes, and we're supposed to believe that they form this bond of friendship, and it's believable. It's amazing. We had. I said I wasn't going to talk about the trilogy films, but let's talk about the comparison is there. I mean, the comparison is invited so much. It's a damn Star Wars film. Here we have more characters in similar situations, so I'm compelled to compelled to compare them, and they do not compare. The trilogy does not compare favorably to this. All of the characters we see, who are major characters, undergo a serious shift. All of them, absolutely all of them, including Han Solo. Debatably Chewbacca too, where they start out one way, events move against them, they're forced to adapt or change, or they want to change, and they do so. So the characters themselves are complete. And I only bring that up because there have been some weird criticisms of this film, which I say weird because it's... Well, let's dig into them. Let's dig into them a bit, and let's start right from the beginning with Rey. There's been a lot of argument that, this is a Mary Sue character, a character who's just too perfect. Like, she's too good at everything. What the hell is a Mary Sue? Let's go there. A Mary Sue character is, if you're writing a fan fiction, you insert a character who's similar to yourself or someone you like, and they're just amazing and everyone loves them. They're too good at everything, and everyone loves them for no good reason. I don't think Rey fits the criteria to be a Mary Sue character, and I'd argue she's not. Now, I would agree she's too good at too many things, which is problematic. I think clearly the impetus was, let's not dance around it. Whether you love the character or hate this character for whatever reason, let's not dance around it. The original Star Wars trilogy of movies, particularly the first one, Star Wars, has almost no female characters. You have Princess Leia. You have that one lady from the first one who talks about how many Bothans died delivering this message. That's it. There are just no female characters. It's very male-centric. The original trilogy is that way a lot. Even with Princess Leia getting more screen time, more lines, more dialogue, more significance, it's a sausage fest. The galaxy long, long ago is a guy's club. Clearly, the purpose of Rey is to kind of turn that around. Make an ass-kicking female character who's very, very prominent in the film. She's not... I don't think there's a single scene where she's rescued by anyone, really. There's the scene where she's being attacked, and Finn, kind of jumps to her rescue. By the time he gets into this, she's already defeated guys. When Han Solo, Finn, Chewbacca, and the rest go down to the planet to save her, she's already escaped. It's the inverse of Princess Leia. It's where, mind you, Princess Leia in the original is kind of talks back to Darth Vader, fuck you, Oh, are these your puppets? Blah blah blah. Tell the Emperor to go fuck himself, Very cool. For 1977, fairly forward-thinking, but for a movie anyway. But at the same time, she is a damsel in distress. She does get rescued, regardless of whether... Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? That's great dialogue. It's part of what made that film good. Princess Leia, definitely. Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia. But I think this is kind of to counteract that by swinging very hard the other way. God, I'm talking about them again. The prequel films tried to do that with Padme, and I don't think they succeeded. The character was too flat. The character was uninteresting. No one cared about that character. Literally no one. She was meant to wear crazy costumes for, I guess, once again, toys. Who gives a shit? Rey is the opposite. And it's people will react negatively to that type of character when they feel the character is insincere. And it's potentially perceived as an insincere character because she's very clearly, very thoroughly engineered to be a specific kind of person before they even thought of putting a single word of dialogue in her mouth. She was meant to be the opposite of what female characters were in the original Star Wars films and the prequels to a large extent. She's just supposed to be this ass-kicking chick who's just good at everything. And that's a problematic character in anything where the character's just too good at everything. Then it becomes boring. I would argue she doesn't fit the Mary Sue. She's just too... The character isn't instantly likable. Sympathetic, yes, because we have this isolated character who's had a rough time of things, doesn't trust people very easily. When she sees BB-8 getting captured, she's kind of, she's gonna, this is not my problem, then kind of acquiesces and then goes and rescues the stupid droid and then tells it to leave. Like, okay, you're free, go away. Not the perfect character and she does that throughout the film. Like when she first meets Finn, she doesn't instantly get all pally with him, even when they kind of start to work together. And that, while a little rushed, that does take a bit of time. My point is, it's not a perfect enough character to fit the rightful criticism of a Mary Sue. A Mary Sue character should be critically, because it's boring and silly to watch. But she trends closer to that. If she doesn't hit that mark, she gets close to it. I'd agree. I mean, we know why she's good at fighting. She was all on her own as a scavenger. We think that she was definitely one of Luke Skywalker's trainees. We don't know at this point. A lot of what could absolve the criticisms of that character will be revealed in, I guess, December of 2017. But the thing for me, and this is the debatable, I think this is what I'm going to say is very debatable. I'd argue she can't be the Mary Sue protagonist simply because I don't think she's the protagonist. And I completely agree that is contentious. That is very debatable because she's close to being a protagonist, but she's not. Finn is. I mean, in the same way that kind of absolves her of being a Mary Sue in much the same way Poe Dameron is a perfect character. He can be a perfect character because he's only appears on screen to do one or two things, mostly to be the best pilot of the Resistance. And we see that's spelled out 6 Ways to Sunday. We actually resaw the Star Wars film, as I'm watching it, like, we think he's dead, but then he reappears, and then he starts shooting TIE fighters from his X-Wing fighter, and I started counting, and I got to 9, I think. I'm like, oh, there's 1. Here's, in, like, rapid succession, like, damn, 1, 2, 3, and then I just kept counting. I got to 9, and he might have hit more. And Finn's on the planet at this point, not even knowing that's Poe Dameron. So, damn, that's a really amazing pilot. Apparently the best pilot in the Resistance. He's and that's okay. When a character is a secondary character and only has one specific goal, it's okay for them to be perfect at it. Because the entire film doesn't revolve around that, so it's okay. We know we're not going to see them be imperfect because their purpose is to do this one thing, so we're only going to see them do that one thing. The rest of the time they're not going to be here, so it's perfectly fine. I'd argue that this film is much more about Finn. Let me amend that. A bit more about Finn than it is Rey. We start off with Finn, not Rey. We follow him, and his arc is slightly more significant. I would argue that Rey is such a prominent secondary character that she's somewhere between being the protagonist and being a secondary or even shared protagonist. I don't think she is the protagonist, but is very, very damn close. But the distance between her being the protagonist and what she ends up being in this film distances her once again from that Mary Sue criticism just a little bit. Not as much as it could or perhaps should, but I'd argue because this film isn't supposed to be about her. A lot of it is we're seeing her origin story, and I strongly suspect the next film she will definitely, no questions asked, be the protagonist. She will definitely be the protagonist in the next one. I have no idea what that next one's about, but from the setup I've seen, I believe that she will definitely be the protagonist, and maybe switch roles. Like if Finn is still up and running, I suspect he will be. He'll fill her role of being, like, it'll be about her, and we'll be more following her and what she does and how she changes. Where Finn, his big thing was this movie. Once again, I think this film, he was the protagonist, the clear protagonist, where she held this weird role between, like I said, a secondary protagonist, a secondary or shared, and the protagonist. That's my take on that. So I'm much cooler with that character. I don't see the character as perfect. She was a little too good at a lot of stuff, but maybe we'll explain why. She explained that she was a pilot. When she met him, he's like, "Yeah, I'm a pilot. I've never flown off-world, but I've piloted lots of stuff before." She she was a character in a harsh environment who was forced to learn to do a lot of things. She's a great scavenger, so she's good at fixing things, mostly for the sake of scavenging. I need to know what parts are important, whether or not something is broken or not, so I can sell it. I can know to find it, I can identify it, and then sell it, and know I'm not getting ripped off because I know how valuable this is or isn't. That makes sense, and that's fine. I don't want to focus too much on that character, but that is a big point of contention in the criticisms of this film, which I think are unfair. In The Force Awakens, there are a few things to criticize, worth criticizing. I don't think it's this character. I understand them, and I don't dismiss them. I get where, I think Max Landis was someone saying, oh, what a Mary Sue, and blah, blah, blah. I don't agree, but I can't accuse it that I can't say those are baseless criticisms. They're not. I see where he's coming from. I really do. I just don't happen to agree entirely. I see a little bit, but like I said, I think there's enough to distance her from that where you really can't say that definitively. But like I said, I think that is actually a contentious statement. Mostly her role as being or not being the protagonist. But let's move on. There's a lot to talk. There's a lot of ground to cover on this one. What next? Funny story. From what I understand, Poe Dameron, early in the film, we establish who Poe Dameron is. We like him almost instantly. He's a very likable character. He sets up the film for us, like what's going on generally and where we're moving. And really, what he sets up is delivered in the first quarter of this film. From there, he gets captured, he gets tortured, he gets rescued by Finn, and apparently killed in the TIE fighter crash. Apparently in the first draft of this script, or the draft that the actor who did Poe Dameron did, that was it. He died in that crash. That was what was intended. Like, Finn was able to wrestle his jacket out, but that was it. That was all. But apparently with test audiences in an early draft of this, an early cut of this movie, the character was so popular, they reinserted him. Like, he got thrown clear of the crash, unconscious, but he was able to find his way back, and so later meets up with the rest of the crew. He was just such a popular character that they stuck with him. And that's cool. I actually really, I'm cool with that. I like the character. I hope he has still a significant role. He could. I don't think he's going to be the next Han Solo, but I think he'll be his own unique thing. And if he's going to go from being the secondary setup character to an actual guy we care about, I could see him in a movie, in either the next one or the one after, him being one of the main on-screen characters. Because that's the logical setup for this film, for the trilogy of films, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? It's first there's this one, which is really the introduction, particular to Finn and Rey. We see Finn's arc, but then Finn is who he is. He's not. He's I'd argue, the protagonist of this film, but I don't see him being the protagonist in the completed arc. I see that being more Rey. Particularly the second film, but I think also the third one is going to be Rey is going to be huge in it. My theory, anyway. But I could see Poe being, once again, such a strong supporting secondary character, he becomes one of the secondary protagonists. Like, he's one of the main characters, the way, while the original trilogy was about Luke Skywalker, we can't ignore Obi-Wan Kenobi or Han Solo at all. Like, I could see Poe Dameron being that role. He's not the same kind of character at all, but the same role as Han Solo. as sort of this very strong support character. Maybe he's romantically entangled with one of the characters, perhaps even Rey, who knows. But something, like, I see more for that character. For a character they were going to just write off. Like, it was his job to die. And that's cool. A real script is a living script. Things change, things evolve. You see new things while they're filming or after they're filming, and that's cool. That's fine. Other than that, the other main complaint was the Death Star 3. The big, really big Death Star. And it's like, yeah, I can see that too. A lot of this film was, hey, remember Star Wars, and not the prequels. The complaint was that this film leaned too much on nostalgia. And that's understandable. They're right. There's a lot of things that are like, hey, remember this from Star Wars? Remember this from Star Wars? It was kind of to reward the audience who had seen this, like myself as a kid. Maybe they did it too much. In fact, let me back up. They did it a bit too much. But it was engineered that way. There's a reason they emphasize that, not just because they're trying to reestablish an audience and establish an audience. A lot of their audience just flat out full on wasn't alive when the original film came out, let alone old enough to watch it. I mean, for God's sake, Star Wars was 1970 freaking 7. So trying to do these like sort of touchstones, like, hey, this other film exists, this is what it was like, trying to anchor it even a little bit into the original film, the original trilogy of films, that's going to be important. It's going to draw attention to the previous trilogy, the Star Wars Empire and Return of the Jedi. So newer audiences will look back on that as kind of like, oh, well, let's go look at that. I mean, dear God, someone who's 21 years old was born in the 1990s. God damn it. It's so long after that. Anyway. My point being, I get why there's a lot of nostalgia pieces in this. I mean, they're just peppered throughout. We have C-3PO, we have Chewbacca, we have R2-D2, we have the chess set they're playing, the Harryhausen animated chess set, and the Millennium Falcon. I mean, there's just so much about this film to call out to the original Star Wars in particular, the first film. Was it over the top? Yeah, it was to the point where it's a little... like at this point, I saw it twice in the theater. I just saw it again last night. So I'm more cognizant of it. It is a little over the top. But I understand why it's there, and I can forgive it because of that. It was sincere. It needed to be done for this one, but let's not... As long as they don't keep doing it, it'll be fine. Which is interesting. That's an interesting thing I want to talk about. In fact, that deserves its own little... Like, I need to collect this thing together and get something to try. Okay. God, this needs discussion. What's interesting and really unique about Star Wars Force Awakens, from a critical standpoint, is that this film isn't just going to be judged on what was on the film, what was on in the movie. It's going to be judged very strongly on comparisons to the earlier films, the original... let's sink down a little bit. It's going to be compared to the original trilogy of films, Star Wars Empire, Return of the Jedi. It's going to be compared to how much better a trilogy it is than the prequel films, which I hated. I'm just going to come out and say it. Not a big fan of them. Not at all. Like I was saying earlier, I think Lucas is an overappreciated creative person, and if nothing else, the prequel show his lack of skills. I have no other way of putting that. I don't think he has... I think he got lucky to be in Star Wars, and I think Empire got lucky to not have him as the director or writer. This film is going to be compared to, like, Is this better than the prequels? Fuck yeah, so far, head and shoulders. But that's low-hanging fruit. How is this going to compare to the original trilogy? That's interesting. We'll find out, because not only is this compared to past movies, and this is what's unique about it, is that how this plays out. It's very connected to the film itself is an arc. It's a film. It possesses a completed arc on several levels for essentially all the characters. They have a beginning, middle, end. This movie is a whole movie. It's not truncated at some point. You don't go, oh, well, I guess we'll wait for the next part of it. It feels like a complete thing, but at the same time, this is definitely part of a trilogy. The first part of a trilogy. So what happens in the next one is going to determine how we feel about this one. Like, they set up a lot of things for Rey's past and how she is and what she'll do. Well, depending on what we learn about her past and where she does go, that'll determine how we feel about what we saw so far, because there's a lot of mysteries regarding Rey. One of the big ones being, is this actually like Luke Skywalker's daughter or something like that? I mean, that was the big one. Because, I mean, it's set up constantly. It's like, the Force is strong in me, my father, my sister, and the Force is strong in you too. Well, why would you bring that up that way if not to indicate some sort of relationship? We'll see. So I think that was just a neat quality. Not that it was done deliberately, but that's how it's going to be, and that's unusual. That this film is going to be compared to... The strength of this film isn't just the strength of this film, but how it compares to other stuff that's happened in the past and future. It's an interesting, quirky little thing. God, what else is there to talk about? This film, it was very dense and big and long. Let me add that too. Other people messing me up. Robots. Okay, so here's my review. Here's my review of this film. And I saw this film, I believe, in December of last year. I think that's when it came out. I saw it when it came out. If you had asked me to review it using my review criteria at that time, it would be a little different than now, because I know I'd be wrong. Because my review is, what are the odds you'll see this and not like it? First part of my review. I would have said very, very low, like extremely low, because it's a very good film. It's good in the sense of Jurassic Park, which was, it didn't have a lot of things people would respond negatively to, but also it's a very good film. I liked it a great deal. Great effects, great acting, fun characters, a fun adventure, a good sense of drama. It's good. It's empirically a good film. And it doesn't have a lot of annoying stuff. I would have said the odds you'll see this and not like this are extremely low, but then apparently a lot of people didn't like it. So apparently I would have been wrong. On second blush, okay. There's a lot of nostalgia in this film. As I mentioned, perhaps too much. Probably too much. And some people reacted negatively to that, and that's a thing that will set people off. Like, I don't like that. And once you get annoyed with that, like I said, it's peppered throughout the film. So if that starts to annoy you, this film is going to annoy you. So that's strike one. Strike two, some people didn't like the Rey character as too... Once again, I don't think she's a Mary Sue, but trends close to being one, and that's a thing that would set them off. And if that's the case, that'll set you off, because, once again, she appears throughout this film. Also, the Death Star... The Star Killer is another Death Star. It's the same plot as as Return of the Jedi in Star Wars, where there's this big, massive thing. I mean, there's so many parallels that it sort of starts to become the same plot. Okay. So the Star Killer is a problem. And that isn't set up perfectly. Like, The fact that there was a Death Star was the thrust of the entire first Star Wars movie. In this one, it's like we're trying to keep the bad guys from finding the rest of the map to Luke Skywalker, and we're trying to get that map for ourselves. That's the thrust of this movie. The fact that the enemy has a weapon that will destroy several worlds at a time isn't the main thrust of the film, and that's crazy. That's, well, we gotta find Luke Skywalker. Oh, by the by, they have a weapon that can kill everyone. The guys who hate us to death. Oh, and they know where we are now. It's what? So it's kind of thrown in as a major plot point very late in the film. Anyway, I could see someone getting set off by that and like being annoyed enough. So maybe they're better than I would have originally said. Still, I think it's a very good film. Odds you won't like it. I'll say 1 in 8 that you won't like it. There's just so much. Even if you are annoyed by some of that stuff, by and by, this is a good film with a lot of great elements. The fight scenes I love. The ship fights are fantastic. If J.J. Abrams has learned to do one thing well, it's direct films that have great fights. The same is true with Star Trek. Much truer with this one. One of the things that wowed people in the previews of this film was that when we first see in the previews for this film, the trailers for this film, Force Awakens, seeing the X-Wing fighters flying over water. They're flying over like a lake or an ocean or something like that. They feel like they have heft. They feel like they have weight. It doesn't look like a video game. It looks like an actual object with mass and momentum, and the objects are filthy. A lot of CGI objects look dirty and gritty, and a lot of practical effects were used where they could be. And this film, and a lot of on-location stuff. Not everything is on a damn green screen like everything in the prequel films, which is going to be compared with endlessly, and much to the prequel's detriment. This was gritty, and it was beautiful. So even if there's stuff that you didn't like, you'll appreciate, and you'll be able to sit back and enjoy this film. So even though I think clearly more people disliked it than I would have guessed, it's a good film. Would I see it again? I've seen it 3 times already. So having seen it 3 times, would I see it again? Shit, yeah. Like I could still sit through this whole film. There's no part of it that's annoying to me. I liked, and I was like going to do Civil War, the Marvel Civil War, Captain America Civil War. There are a couple scenes that, like, they're a little played out. Like, seeing them repeatedly, they get kind of dull. The airport fight is not one of them. Definitely not. But there are a couple that are. This film doesn't have anything like that. Everything is pretty watchable. And it has enough complexity that you can follow everything going on, but rewatching it's like, oh, I didn't appreciate, for example, let's not stick to vagaries. One point, Poe Dameron is able to get through the oscillator thing, and is inside this giant planet-sized weapon, and starts fucking shit up. And it looks great. It looks great. It looks just great. It looks awesome doing it. Like, I don't know how you could improve that scene other than, like, have him give them the finger in a rearview mirror or something like that as he's flying away. He just looks so awesome doing that. And it's set up. It's a team effort. It's once again, it's why I don't think Rey's a Mary Sue. She doesn't rule this film. She doesn't blow up the Starkiller base. She helps lower the shields so that Poe Dameron and heroic resistance members who are getting their shit fucked up, getting killed left and right, can break through, so it's not consequence-free. People die. So Poe Dameron can get in there and just be awesome and just blow the shit out of everything. It's great. I'm happy to see that. Great stuff. I probably have more to say about this, but I can't think of it. And I know this is already like an hour long or something stupid. So we're just going to stick to where we are and go with this. Other than that, these are my thoughts in this film. Comment below. As always, I would like to discuss this. Like, I do videos for stuff because, like, oh, this is something I'd like to talk about, but I'm not as good at nailing people down and starting to talk about this, that, or the other. So, yeah, comment, or send me a message or something. I'm happy to discuss this, because this is a cool thing to discuss. Like and subscribe if you like. That's me, I'm out.